Hi, once again, Andre, and welcome to all our viewers. We had a question on our channel when we were talking about fasting. If you fast and you lose a lot of muscle mass, does it matter or can you gain that muscle mass back fast?
Sean, yes, I think there's a lot to unpack in that question. I think firstly, the concept of muscle memory. So maybe we should just pause for a moment and maybe unpack that concept and discuss whether it is even a thing. So in the literature, if they refer to muscle memory, I think there are two components to that. But basically, it comes down to when you learn a new movement pattern, like riding a bicycle, or on the other hand, you through exercise build muscle mass, hypertrophy. If you then have a period where you lay off from exercise, where you're inactive, and you then start exercising again, you've got the ability to relearn that pattern or to be able to perform a movement pattern much faster than what it originally took you to actually learn that movement pattern. For example, in the case of riding a bicycle, we all remember the struggles we had when we initially had to learn to ride a bike. Say you then stop riding that bike for a period of time, you get back on the bike again. It won't take you as long again to master riding that bike. And we'll unpack the reason just now, according to science. In terms of muscle memory, in terms of hypertrophy, the theory is that if you gain muscle mass, the number of myonuclei increase. That's the nuclei within the muscle fibers. And if you then stop training, though the muscle size gets smaller, the underlying infrastructure, the nuclei still remain. And that means if you start training again, you will get to the same size that you previously had in a much shorter time. So those two components, it's a movement pattern, and movement patterns are laid down in the CNS, the central nervous system. So I think we can broadly say that that underlying infrastructure in terms of the neural pattern of an exercise, the execution pattern, as well as the physiological sort of infrastructure in terms of the micronuclei, that doesn't just disappear and it remains there for some time.
If I may just ask a question, the CNS, is that something to do with the nervous system or is that embedded in the brain?
The brain forms part of your central nervous system. So it's the brain and the spinal cord. That is the central nervous system. And then obviously you've got your peripheral nervous system branching from that. So the brain is very much part of the CNS.
Is there any studies that show the amount of time that it does remain? Is it perhaps permanent, or how long lived would such a thing be, or does it decrease over time again as well?
There's not agreement from the literature. There are some studies that show that it lasts for a very long time. Other studies indicate that it may that ability to regain the muscle memory factor, that it lasts for 3 to 6 months or maybe a year. It's not 100% clear. But I think the positive takeaway is that it is a thing. It's there. Anybody who's ever set foot in a gym and trained, left it for a while and came back, I think would attest to the fact that the second time around, it's much easier and much faster to regain that muscle size. So I don't think we have to worry too much about the fact how long it actually remains. It is there and you can use it to your benefit.
Okay, so I think maybe what I gather from also what you're saying is maybe just to clear it as you've cleared it for me as well, that there's no actual brain in the muscle, but it's more like you mentioned that physical micronuclear, and of course the central nervous system that is involved.
Yeah, no, that's true. So it's two components. It's the neural pattern, the movement patterns that's laid down in your CNS, central nervous system, and then the myonuclei or the nuclei within the muscle fibers themselves, within the muscle cells. Those are structures, and both these structures remain if you stop training. I think that's the underlying principle. And once you start with the exercise, you can regain those abilities much quicker.
So if we now get back to the actual understanding from the question, that not worried to lose muscle mass during fasting, for instance, I think in theory that might sound true, but in practice, I'm assuming that's not something you would ideally want to do. You'd rather try to hold on to every bit of muscle that available to you.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think in health and fitness, like most things in the world that we deal with, context is essential. So if we talk about fasting, I mean, that's a huge topic of itself. And it comes down to the fact, what is your goal? Why do you fast? Some people fast for religious purposes. Some people fast for longevity purposes. Others use it as a weight loss tool, a way to restrict your calories. So I guess it depends, but let's assume that our viewer who has actually asked this question used fasting as a fat loss tool. He wanted to lose some fat mass. That is no different than doing a normal diet with calorie restriction, because one aspect, and that's not the only aspect and benefit of fasting, but the one benefit is that it does help you to restrict calories. And some people find it much easier to adhere to a fasting protocol than actually going on a calorie restricted diet. So if that works for you, it is a very handy tool for weight loss. But if you try and lose fat, and then we must actually make that distinction, not weight, we want to lose fat, because you can lose weight by losing muscle. Then if we assume that that's what you're doing, you would like to, while you are losing fat, you want to try and hang on to your muscle mass. It's not unlike a competitive bodybuilder who's preparing for a contest. They go on a very strict diet in their prep. And the idea is to get to a very low body fat percentage while maintaining muscle mass. If you do that diet and in the process you eat into your muscle mass, you've defeated the purpose. You'll look very bad on stage. The same goes for a person, even if you're not a competitive bodybuilder or sports person. In my mind, it's actually quite foolish to go on a very aggressive diet, whether that be through calorie restriction or through fasting, to actually pop up on the other side, weighing less on the scale, but you've lost a lot of your muscle mass. So for starters, I think it's a bad strategy. I'm a muscle mass man. I'm very much in favor of hanging on to muscle mass. It becomes increasingly important as we age. There are many studies that clearly show the link between maintaining muscle mass and strength with longevity. It becomes very important as we age. As we age, there's something called sarcopenia. So if you don't do something about it in terms of your nutrition and your resistance training, you will lose a certain percentage of your muscle mass every year as you age. And that has got serious implications for your longevity and your healthgevity, being as healthy and independent as long as possible. So any practice that people engage in that allow them to lose fat should have a focus on trying to also hang on to the muscle mass. And like we previously said, the two things you can do is to up your protein intake even further. You need to be on high protein. So the more you restrict your calories, you want to increase your protein, and you want to add resistance training into the mix to get that mechanical stress on the muscle, the tension, and that's how you try and hang on to the muscle mass. So coming back to the question, the viewer's question then. So if you do fasting for weight loss purposes, yes, try and hang on to it. But if you do lose some muscle mass, I think in theory, you are correct, seeing that muscle memory is a thing. If you then start adding back the calories and the protein and the mechanical tension, in theory, muscle memory would help you to regain that muscle mass a bit quicker than originally when you build it for the first time. But still, it is not a good practice. So, but that's the theoretical answer. It is possible. I want to take it one step further, though. If you incorporate fasting as a lifestyle, it's not a short-term thing. You want to do that for the rest of your life. The extreme of that is OMAD, 1 meal a day, where people only eat once a day. They only eat dinner. In theory, if we look at energy balance and all the guidelines of body composition, if you want to maintain your muscle mass and your body weight by eating once a day, you should then, in one sitting, eat your daily calories for the day. Say, for example, you require 2,700 calories, and say you require 140 grams of protein. You then have to eat that in one sitting. So you will have to eat one huge meal, 2,700 calories, containing 140 grams of protein, and then you will be able to maintain your muscle mass. With my experience, most of the people that I've encountered who do OMAD find it very difficult to eat that much in one sitting. They usually undereat in terms of the calories, and they usually eat less than their required protein target for the day. That means that, yes, you will lose weight, but the chances are 100% that you will lose muscle mass in the process. And in that sense, for me, then fasting and OMAD is not a good long-term strategy, because if you continuously lose muscle mass, there's no way I can think of that as a good strategy at all. So those would be the challenges with the extreme if you do only one meal a day. And again, I just want to stress that I'm not saying there are not a lot of benefits with fasting. There's so much literature out there on YouTube and on the social media and on the web in terms of all the beautiful benefits of fasting. I'm purely talking from a muscle mass perspective, hanging on to muscle mass and strength.
So I think I gather for myself from this conversation as well that yes, muscle memory is a thing. However, if you do fast and you do lose muscle mass, there's no quick fix. It's not an immediate fix. Yes, it is going to be quicker, maybe weeks instead of months, or for example, but yeah, I'd rather not go that route and rather try and hang on to the muscle, because you cannot just replace it immediately. It's going to take another set of hard work, hard exercise, and obviously keeping your diet clean and in line as well with that type of a goal.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe just another comment from my side. Again, it depends on your goal. I think you will be hard pressed to show me one professional bodybuilder who adopts a 1 meal a day strategy. Uh, Looking at the sheer amount of calories those guys have to take in on a daily basis, it's just impossible to do that in one sitting. So they typically spread out their nutrition through the day, and they have multiple sittings. They have multiple meals during the day. They typically, if they eat 200 or 300 grams of protein per day, whatever it may be, they usually spread it out in 4 or 5 equal portions throughout the day, and they spread it throughout the day. That's the traditional way of eating for muscle mass. Again, I know people are going to comment around that. It is possible to maintain and even grow muscle while fasting. There are strategies. So I'm not saying that it's mutually exclusive, but if fasting is done incorrectly, it may be problematic. But for certain, there are mitigating steps that you can take to mitigate that risk of losing muscle mass. And it again comes down to, you need to hit your protein goal in a day, and calorie balance becomes a problem. If you eat in a deficit, you will lose mass or fat mass. If you eat in a surplus, usually that's how you gain muscle mass. And I think, again, the trick is to do it in such a way that you lose fat while maintaining muscle. And I think that's the key point here. And I do see people getting it right, incorporating fasting with muscle building. And I do see people who get it completely wrong, who look terrible, who actually become unhealthy through loss of muscle mass. And I think that those are the key points.
Andre, thanks again for clearing this for us and for the viewers. If they have any questions or feel this was insightful, please let us know in the comments. And then hope to see you next time.
Thanks so much, Sean.